The first time Ella commented on my laundry service, I laughed it off. We were sitting in my dorm, half watching a Netflix documentary neither of us cared about, when she spotted the neatly folded bag by the door. "What's that?" she asked, squinting like it was a UFO. I told her it was for the campus laundry program. They pick it up, wash it, fold it, and drop it back off. Best money I've ever spent. She snorted. "You pay for that? Seriously? Washing clothes takes like 2 hours max." I shrugged. 2 hours I'd rather spend doing literally anything else. She didn't let it go. Must be nice to have cash to burn. Her tone was light, but something about it lingered in the air. Sticky and heavy. I brushed it off. Ella had always been opinionated about politics, food, people who wore socks with sandals. Laundry was just her latest crusade. Except it wasn't just laundry. Every week, like clockwork, she'd come over and find a way to bring it up. "Is this where your trust fund goes?" she'd ask, smirking. "You know, some people do their own laundry. It's not rocket science." At first, I played along. I'd joke about being allergic to detergent or pretend I didn't know how to turn on a washing machine. But her comments weren't funny anymore. They were needling, judging. One time, she said, "No wonder you're so clueless about life. You don't even handle your own basic chores." That one stung. I could feel it simmering inside me, a heat that refused to cool. The final straw came during a group hangout in the common room. Ella, always the loudest voice in any conversation, zeroed in on me. "You know," she announced to everyone, "some people around here don't even do their own laundry. They just pay someone else to deal with it." Imagine being that out of touch. Everyone laughed, but my face burned. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. Something in me snapped. "Ella," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "you think it's ridiculous because you're poor. I'm not. So maybe stop worrying about how I spend my money." The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was so thick, I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Ella's face froze, her smile dropping like a stone. She stared at me, her lips trembling, but she didn't say a word. Then she grabbed her bag and walked out. That night, the weight of what I'd said hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just a low blow. It was a missile aimed straight at her insecurities. Ella wasn't perfect, but she didn't deserve that. Still, a part of me felt justified. Why had she been so obsessed with my choices? Why couldn't she just let me live my life? Over the next few days, Ella avoided me. Our mutual friends whispered about the fight, though no one said anything directly to me. I started to notice things I hadn't before. How Ella never ordered food when we went out. How she always reused her notebooks from previous semesters. How she'd quietly slip away before the bill came. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. I thought about apologizing, but every time I worked up the nerve, I talked myself out of it. Would she even accept it? Would it make things worse? Instead, I tried to justify my actions, convincing myself that Ella had pushed me to that point. It was easier to be angry than to feel guilty. The turning point came when I ran into her at the campus food pantry. I was there volunteering for my community service hours. She was there shopping. I spotted her from across the room, a box of cereal in one hand and a jar of peanut butter in the other. She looked up, saw me, and froze. In that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't about laundry. It never had been. Ella wasn't jealous of my laundry service. She was frustrated by the gap between our lives, the invisible wall that privilege had built between us. And instead of reaching across it, I'd used it as a weapon. I walked over, my heart pounding. "Hey," I said awkwardly. She didn't respond, just stared at the floor. I took a deep breath. "Ella, I'm sorry. What I said was awful. I wasn't thinking. I felt attacked and I lashed out. But it wasn't okay." She looked at me then, her eyes wary. "Why do you care?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You made it pretty clear what you think of me." "That's not true," I said quickly. "I don't think anything bad about you. I was defensive, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." It wasn't forgiveness, not really, but it was a start. We didn't magically become closer after that. Things were awkward for a while, and we drifted apart by the end of the semester. But I learned something important from that experience, about privilege, about empathy, and about the dangers of letting pride win over kindness. I still use the laundry service, But now, every time I see that blue canvas bag, I think of Ella, and I remind myself to be a little gentler with the people around me. You never know what someone else is carrying. The trouble began with the vacuum. It wasn't just any vacuum. It was mine. A sleek, high-tech model with an LED display, detachable parts, and a name, Captain Suction. I'd splurged on it after my old roommate left, citing irreconcilable differences over my habit of reorganizing the fridge alphabetically. Captain Suction and I had been through a lot together, and when I moved in with Derek, I made one thing clear. This is my vacuum. I don't mind sharing it, but treat it with respect. At first, Derek seemed chill about it. He wasn't a neat freak, but he wasn't a slob either. He liked video games, hated kale, and was blessedly quiet when he stumbled home drunk at 2 a.m. Our cohabitation was uneventful, maybe even pleasant, until the day I came home and found Captain Suction dead. The vacuum was lying on its side in the living room, its cord coiled like intestines spilling out of a wounded soldier. One of the detachable parts was missing, and there was a faint, ominous burning smell. Derek was on the couch, controller in hand, yelling into his headset about someone camping like a noob. I pointed at the fallen captain. What the hell happened? Derek paused the game, glanced at the vacuum, and shrugged. Oh, that? Yeah, I think it overheated or something. Sorry, bro. Bro? I didn't even like being called dude, let alone bro and overheated. My vacuum didn't overheat. It was practically the Ferrari of cleaning tools. I knelt beside it, cradling its injured form, and inspected the damage. The filter was clogged with what looked like cat litter, except we didn't have a cat. What is this? I demanded, holding up the dusty clump. Derek leaned back into the couch cushions, looking as casual as someone accused of murder. Oh yeah, I borrowed it to clean up some stuff in my car. Guess it was pretty dirty. My bad. Your car? I spluttered. Captain Suction was an indoor vacuum, designed for hardwood floors and carpets, not whatever horrors lurked in Derek's Subaru. But before I could launch into a full-blown tirade, he said, "Don't worry, I'll fix it," and turned back to his game like he hadn't just committed a felony against household appliances. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't demand compensation. I just stood up, carried the wounded vacuum to my room, and locked the door. If Derek didn't respect the sanctity of Captain Suction, he didn't deserve access to it. Simple as that. What followed was a slow, simmering escalation of domestic warfare. At first, I thought Derek might notice the state of the floors, the crumbs, the dust bunnies, the rogue Dorito that had been under the coffee table since last Tuesday. I thought he'd realize the error of his ways and apologize. But no, Derek apparently was content to live in squalor. Days turned into weeks, and the mess only grew. And still, he never said a word. So I made my move. I stopped taking out the trash. Usually, I handled it because Derek was one of those people who thought taking out the trash meant balancing a pizza box on top of an already overflowing pile and praying gravity would hold. Not anymore. I let the bags pile up, the smell wafting into the living room like a passive-aggressive ghost. Derek retaliated by leaving his dishes in the sink. Not just plates and cups, but creative things like a blender full of crusted protein shake or a pot with spaghetti sauce hardened into a substance that could probably be used as construction adhesive. Each morning, I'd wake up to find the pile had grown, like some grotesque performance art piece, and I refused to touch it. Then came the popcorn incident. One night, Derek decided to make popcorn, which would have been fine, except he apparently didn't believe in lids. I walked into the kitchen the next morning and found kernels scattered everywhere, on the floor, on the counter, even on top of the fridge. When I asked him about it, he said, "Oh yeah, I think some spilled. No big deal, right? No big deal." It looked like a squirrel had broken in and hosted a kegger. I didn't even respond. I just went back to my room and made a mental note to escalate further. I stopped cleaning the bathroom. Derek was a shower shaver, the kind of guy who leaves little hair clumps on the tiles like abstract art. Before, I'd begrudgingly wipe them up because I couldn't stand looking at them. But now, I let them sit. They dried into tiny, wiry fossils, a testament to his laziness. The toilet? Not my problem anymore. The toothpaste cap he never screwed back on? Let it congeal, for all I cared. The worst part was Derek seemed completely unbothered. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Was I the unreasonable one? Was I overreacting? But then I'd step on a sticky patch of floor or catch a whiff of the rotting trash, and my resolve would harden. This wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about principle. Things came to a head one Saturday when I found a pile of laundry on the couch. My couch. Derek had apparently decided the communal space was his personal closet, and the clothes weren't even folded, just dumped there like the couch was a giant laundry basket. I stared at the pile for a full minute, feeling a cocktail of rage and despair bubbling in my chest. So I did the only logical thing. I took one of his shirts, shoved it under my bed, and waited. It wasn't a great plan, but it felt satisfying in the moment. I'd finally struck back, however petty. And when Derek eventually noticed, he'd realize how childish this whole thing was, and we'd both apologize and move on. Except Derek didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. The laundry pile remained untouched for days, a silent reminder of our stalemate. I started to fantasize about dramatic solutions, burning the clothes, moving out in the dead of night, hiring an actor to pretend to be a health inspector. But I knew none of those would solve the core issue. Derek and I were fundamentally incompatible as roommates. Eventually, the standoff became so unbearable I had to confront him. I found him in his natural habitat, the couch, eating Cheetos and watching anime. "Derek," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "can we talk about the state of this apartment?" He looked at me, crumbs on his chin, and said, "Yeah, sure. I was actually going to ask when you're going to vacuum again. The floors are kind of gross." Reader, I nearly blacked out. It started with the boots. I don't mean some ordinary pair of boots you grab at the mall. These were the boots. Black leather, buttery soft, with hand-tooled details on the sides. My best friend, Kayla, had saved up for months to buy them after spotting them in a tiny boutique downtown. She'd babbled for weeks about how they were one-of-a-kind and life-changing, as if footwear could rewrite your destiny. I teased her, sure, but when she finally bought them, even I had to admit they were gorgeous. They weren't just boots. They were art. Kayla treated them like a precious artifact. She kept them on a special shelf, away from her other shoes. She polished them after every wear and refused to wear them if there was even a hint of rain in the forecast. Once, I joked that she should just marry them and get it over with, and she replied, "I would, but they're too good for me." It was ridiculous. But then, last Friday, my cousin Marie called to tell me about her impromptu party. Marie throws these ridiculous themed parties that never make sense, and this one was no different. Leather and lace night. I rolled my eyes, but agreed to come. The problem was, I had nothing to wear that would remotely match the theme. I rummaged through my closet, cursing my wardrobe for being 90% denim. And that's when I thought of the boots. I know what you're thinking. I shouldn't have touched them. I know that now. But in the moment, it felt harmless. Kayla was out of town visiting her sister. She wouldn't even know. And honestly, the boots were perfect. They tied my whole outfit together, and I figured it wasn't like I'd be trekking through mud. I'd wear them, look fabulous, and return them before she even got back. So I borrowed them. The moment I slipped them on, I understood why Kayla loved them so much. They made me feel unstoppable, like I could conquer the world and look amazing doing it. At the party, everyone noticed them. Marie said, "Those boots are killer." And even some guy I'd never met told me they were sexy as hell. I felt on top of the world. And then the tequila happened. I'm not a big drinker, but Marie's parties always come with bad decisions baked into the atmosphere. By my third shot, the night was a blur of music, laughter, and questionable dance moves. At some point, someone suggested we take the party outside, onto Marie's deck. I remember stumbling out, the air crisp and cool, and flopping onto one of her ancient lawn chairs. Here's the thing about Marie's deck. It's old. Like rickety old. It's been on its last legs for years, and I guess none of us thought about that as we danced and jumped around like idiots. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, but suddenly, there was a loud crack. The next thing I knew, the deck gave way under me, and I was tumbling into a patch of damp dirt below. I wasn't hurt, thankfully, but the boots? Oh, the boots. The left one had a long, jagged scrape down the side, and the right one had landed squarely in a puddle of mud. I tried wiping them off, but the damage was done. The leather looked warped and scuffed, the intricate tooling smeared. My heart sank as I stared at them. I spent the next morning trying to fix them. I Googled leather repair tips, tried buffing out the scratch, even took them to a shoe repair place downtown. The guy there gave me a look like I'd committed a crime and said, "These are beyond repair." My stomach dropped. By the time Kayla got back on Sunday, I was still debating whether to tell her the truth. I chickened out and put the boots back on her shelf, hoping maybe she wouldn't notice. She noticed. I got a text later that night. "Did you touch my boots?" I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. I considered lying, saying maybe they'd gotten damaged another way, but I knew Kayla wasn't stupid. So I told her the truth, or most of it. I admitted to borrowing them, but downplayed the damage, saying they'd gotten a little scuffed but nothing serious. She didn't respond for a while, and then she sent me a photo of the boots with a single word. "Explain." I couldn't. Not really. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. The next day, she texted me again, saying, "Do you even understand what these meant to me? You knew how much I loved them, and you didn't even ask." She's right, of course. I didn't ask. I assumed it wouldn't matter. I offered to replace them, but she said, "You can't replace them. They're unique." That's the point. She hasn't spoken to me since. I thought I was doing something harmless, but now I'm wondering if I crossed a line. Are they just boots? Or was I a bad friend for taking something I knew was important to her? I've always thought of myself as the kind of person who can read a room. Call it a talent, or maybe just a survival skill honed over years of social gatherings, office parties, and awkward first dates. I'm the guy who knows when to jump in with a quip to lighten the mood, when to let the silence breathe, and when to unleash a killer punchline that leaves everyone howling. At least that's what I thought. Turns out I might be terrible at it. Last week, my sister, Lily, threw what she called a small celebration of enormous importance. It was her PhD defense day. 8 years of her life poured into studying something I barely understood, something about ancient trade routes and pottery shards. To me, it all sounded like the plot of a History Channel special, but to Lily, it was her magnum opus, her life's work. So, when she invited me to her post-defense dinner, I knew I had to show up and play the part of the supportive older brother. The dinner wasn't exactly small. Lily had rented out the back room of a fancy Italian restaurant, invited her advisor, her lab mates, and a scattering of family members. Everyone was there to toast the newly minted Dr. Lily winners, and boy, did they. Speeches were made. Glasses clinked. People said things like inspiring and a testament to perseverance. It wasn't that I wasn't proud of her. I was. But sitting there, surrounded by people who could probably name every Roman emperor in chronological order, I felt a little out of place. What did I know about pottery shards or trade routes? I work in advertising, for crying out loud. My job is to convince people they need fancier razors, not solve the mysteries of ancient civilizations. I wanted to be part of the moment, though, so I decided to lean into what I do know: humor. After Lily's advisor finished his speech, a long, slightly pompous thing about her contribution to the field, I decided it was my turn to say a few words. I stood up, raised my glass, and said, "Here's to Lily. We always knew you'd make history. We just didn't know it'd be literally." A chuckle rippled through the room. Encouraged, I kept going. And let's not forget the real heroes here. Whoever invented Google Scholar and coffee. More laughter. Not uproarious, but enough to keep me going. Then, buoyed by the warmth of the wine and the brief flicker of attention, I landed my piece de resistance. "And hey, Lily, if this whole academic thing doesn't work out, at least you'll have a fallback career at Antiques Roadshow." Dead silence. I mean, absolute dead silence. It was like I'd accidentally hit the mute button on the universe. My sister stared at me, her smile frozen mid-sip of wine. Her advisor adjusted his glasses and looked down at his plate. Even my mom, usually my biggest fan, gave me a wide-eyed what the hell look. It was the kind of silence that feels like a vacuum, like it's actively pulling the oxygen out of your lungs. I try to salvage it. "Come on," I said, gesturing around the room. "She's a rock star, and by rock star, I mean someone who literally studies old rocks." Nothing, not even a pity laugh. Lily stood up then, her face pale but composed. "I'm going to get some air," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She didn't look at me as she walked out of the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then, conversation resumed in awkward murmurs, as if everyone had collectively agreed to pretend I wasn't there. I sat back down, cheeks burning, and took a long sip of wine, wishing it could swallow me whole. I found Lily outside a little later, leaning against the brick wall of the restaurant and staring at the streetlights. She didn't say anything as I approached, so I started talking. "Lils, come on. It was a joke. You know, I didn't mean anything by it." She turned to me, and I was startled to see tears in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like to work for something for years and finally have your moment, only for someone to make it feel like a joke?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, hurt in a way that made me feel like the world's biggest idiot. "It wasn't a joke about you," I said, fumbling. I was trying to make everyone laugh." She shook her head. "Sometimes it's not about making people laugh, Jake. Sometimes it's about just letting something be important." That stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't thought about it like that. To me, humor was a way to connect, to fill the gaps where things might feel too stiff or formal. But standing there in the cold, watching my sister wipe at her eyes, I realized that what I'd thought was lightening the moment had actually cheapened it. I tried to steal the spotlight, even if I hadn't meant to. Lily eventually went back inside, but the night felt irreparably off. People congratulated her and hugged her, but there was a crack in the celebration, a quiet tension that didn't go away. I stayed in the corner, replaying my words over and over in my head, each repetition making them sound worse. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had said. Letting something be important. Was I incapable of that? Did I always have to be the funny guy, the one who defused every situation, even when no one asked me to? It made me wonder if my whole approach to life was more selfish than I'd ever realized. But even now, part of me feels like people are blowing it out of proportion. It was a joke, a little quip, nothing mean-spirited. Why couldn't they see that? Why couldn't Lily see that? Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe she's just too sensitive about it. I don't know. So here I am, asking strangers on the internet. I came home that evening with a strange sense of déjà vu, as though I'd walked into someone else's life. A version of myself that existed in the mind of a 1950s sitcom writer. My house was the set, perfectly arranged for the scene that awaited me. My in-laws stiffly perched on the couch like relics from another century. My husband quietly polishing the kitchen counter in a way that screamed avoidance, and the faint tension hanging in the air like a discordant violin note. I dropped my bag on the bench near the door and offered a cheerful, "Hey everyone." My voice carried the kind of practiced warmth you use in front of people who have judged you since the moment they laid eyes on you. My in-laws mumbled a barely there response. My husband didn't look up. It was his night to cook. I should have smelled garlic sautéing in butter, heard the sizzle of something frying, felt the low hum of the dinner ritual we had cultivated over years of partnership. But the kitchen was dead, clean, empty. My stomach growled in protest, and I shifted my gaze to my husband. "What's for dinner?" I asked, trying to keep it light. Before he could even open his mouth, his mother cut in. "He's not cooking tonight," she said, her tone smug and deliberate. "He's been working all day. You should cook for your family." My first instinct was disbelief. Surely, this was some misunderstanding, some cosmic prank meant to test my patience. But when I looked at my husband, my partner, my equal, I saw the truth in his lowered gaze. He wasn't going to back me up. He wasn't even going to speak. "I see," I said slowly, weighing my words, trying to decide whether I was too hungry to fight. I turned away and opened the delivery app on my phone. If no one was cooking, fine. I'd handle it my way. When the food arrived, I plated it for myself and the kids without a word. My in-laws waited, expectantly, until my husband quietly got up and served himself and them. He returned to the table, still avoiding my eyes, while his mother began a monologue that could have been ripped straight from a guide to outdated gender roles. "In my day," she said, gesturing with her fork like a professor giving a lecture, "women understood that their place was in the home. They took pride in serving their husbands and raising their children. They didn't need a career to feel important." I chewed my food, each bite punctuated by her words, each swallow harder than the last. My kids were quiet, their eyes darting between the adults like spectators at a match no one asked to see. Finally, I set my fork down and addressed my husband. "Do you have anything to say about this?" My voice was calm, almost clinical, but inside, a storm was brewing. He looked up briefly, and for a second, I thought I saw something: guilt, hesitation, the man I knew, before his face hardened. "She's not wrong," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "Maybe you could, I don't know, make more an effort at home. Tradition exists for a reason, you know? It wouldn't hurt to act more like a proper woman." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was oppressive. My chest tightened, and my mind spun as I tried to process his words. This was the man who had shared late-night diaper changes with me, who had cheered me on when I landed a promotion, who had once joked that he'd be a stay-at-home dad if I ever made CEO. And now he was throwing all of that under the bus for what? A pat on the head from his mother? I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I might have screamed. "Tradition," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass, "doesn't allow a man making $35K to support a family of 5. You're too broke to be this sexist." The words hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire, choking the room with their weight. My mother-in-law gasped, clutching her pearls in the most literal sense, while my father-in-law looked at his plate as if it held the answers to life's mysteries. My husband's face crumpled, and he excused himself from the table without another word. The silence at the table was deafening. I turned to my kids and smiled, forcing normalcy back into the space. "How's the chicken?" I asked, as if nothing had happened. Later that night, I found him sitting in our room, staring at the wall. His face was a mess of emotions: shame, anger, regret, all swirling in his expression as he struggled to find words. But I wasn't ready for his words. "Not yet. You let them tear me down in my own home," I said, breaking the quiet. "You let them speak to me like I'm some servant they hired. And you," I paused, my voice catching, "you agreed with them." He started to speak, but I held up a hand. "No, you don't get to explain this away. If you're that desperate for their approval, maybe you should have married someone who fit their idea of tradition. But here's the thing, you didn't. You married me. And if you can't respect the woman I am, maybe you should figure out why that is." I didn't wait for his reply. I turned off the light, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. Somewhere between the person he was and the person he became around them, something had broken. Whether it could be fixed, well, that was a question for another day. It started with a key. Not just any key, my key. The one to my car. The car I bought with my own money after saving for 3 years of miserable weekend shifts at the diner. It wasn't anything fancy. A decade-old Honda with a dent on the passenger door and a CD player that skipped if you hit a bump. But it was mine. My freedom on wheels. And apparently my brother thought that freedom was his too. Liam's always been the golden child. The kind of guy who could charm his way out of a speeding ticket while I'd get slapped with a fine for driving 2 miles over the limit. He's 3 years younger than me, still lives at home, and spends his nights working on his music, which is code for playing Xbox and occasionally strumming the same 3 chords on a guitar he bought secondhand. I don't know what my parents see in him, but somehow he always gets a pass. Anyway, last Saturday, I was running late for a morning yoga class. Yeah, I know yoga. Judge all you want, but it's the only thing keeping me sane these days. I grabbed my bag, my water bottle, and reached for my car key on the hook by the door, except it wasn't there. At first, I thought I'd misplaced it. I tore through my bag, my jacket pockets, even the fridge, because who hasn't left something in there during a sleep-deprived haze? Nothing. Then it hit me, Liam. I marched to his room and found him sitting there in his boxers, headphones on, controller in hand, blasting zombies to pieces on the TV screen. "Liam!" I shouted, but he didn't even flinch. I yanked the headset off his head. "Where's my car?" "Huh?" He blinked at me like I'd just interrupted him mid-surgery. "My car," I repeated, hands on my hips. "Where is it?" "Oh yeah," he said casually, like this was totally normal. "I borrowed it. Needed to pick up some stuff." My brain short-circuited for a second. "You borrowed it? Without asking? Where is it now?" "Relax," he said, setting his controller down. "I parked it out front." I sprinted to the window, and sure enough, there was my car, dusty, with what looked like a new scratch on the rear bumper. My pulse shot up. Liam, what the hell? You can't just take my car. Why not? He said, completely unbothered. I was careful. Careful. I was practically shaking now. There's a new scratch on it. And what if you'd gotten in an accident? What if you got a ticket? My name is on the insurance, not yours. Oh, come on, he said, waving me off. It's not like you were using it. You're so uptight. Uptight? My voice cracked. This isn't about being uptight. It's about respect. You don't just take someone's car without asking. You're overreacting, he said, standing up and stretching like this was the end of the conversation. I'll fill it up later if you're that worried about it. That's not the point, I shouted, but he'd already turned back to his game, headphones back on, effectively ending the argument. I stomped out, seething, but I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. When I finally got to my car and opened the door, the smell hit me like a brick wall. Fast food. Not just any fast food either, but the unmistakable greasy stench of Liam's favorite chili fries. I looked down and saw the evidence. A grease-stained paper bag crumpled on the passenger seat, a soda cup tipped over on the floor, and a faint smear of ketchup on the gear shift. I swear I saw red. I marched back inside, flung the door to his room open, and practically threw the bag at him. Are you kidding me? You trashed my car too. He shrugged, barely looking up. I was hungry. You're unbelievable, I snapped. You got your own damn bike. Why didn't you use that? It's raining, he said, finally making eye contact. You wanted me to bike in the rain? Yes, Liam, because I'd rather you get wet than disrespect me and my stuff like this. I was yelling now, my face hot with anger. Do you even understand how selfish you're being? Selfish. He stood up, finally matching my energy. You're the one hoarding the car, like it's some kind of sacred artifact. It's just a car, Maddie. We're family. What's yours is mine, right? No. I shot back. What's mine is mine because I paid for it, I take care of it, and I don't treat it like a garbage can. God, you're such a control freak, he said, throwing his hands up. You always have to make everything about you. Because you make it impossible not to. I screamed. You don't take responsibility for anything. You act like you're entitled to whatever you want, and I'm sick of it. We both froze, breathing heavily, the room thick with tension. Finally, Liam broke the silence. You know what? Fine. I won't touch your precious car again. Happy. Not if you're just going to sulk about it like a 5-year-old. I snapped, storming out before I could say anything worse. Now, we're at a stalemate. He hasn't apologized, and I sure as hell don't feel like forgiving him. Every time I see him lounging around the house, I want to scream, but then I hear my mom in the back of my head saying, family is family. You got to work it out. The thing is, I don't know if I'm overreacting or if I've finally reached my limit with Liam. I mean, he was out of line, right? But maybe I could have handled it better? I don't know anymore. So, Reddit? AITA? It started with the photo, an image of a sunlit canyon, red cliffs glowing in golden hour light, with a tiny figure at the edge of the world. The caption read, hike, breathe, be. I stared at it for a long time, imagining myself in that wide, quiet expanse. It felt like the kind of trip I needed, the kind of reset that doesn't come with a Wi-Fi password. I showed the photo to Danny that evening, holding up my phone as she sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her own feed. What do you think about Utah? Zion National Park? Hiking starry skies, maybe even some rock climbing if we're feeling ambitious. Danny barely glanced up before shaking her head. Utah? No. Too much sweating, not enough margaritas. Her words landed like a door slamming shut. Okay, but what about the stars? I pressed. You can't margarita your way to that kind of sky. She smirked and leaned into her phone. I can margarita my way to plenty of things that don't involve bug spray and dehydration. I sighed, knowing this was going to take some effort. Danny was the queen of ease, of sprawling on beach chairs with a paperback and a sun hat while the world moved quietly around her. Her idea of a vacation wasn't just avoiding effort. It was creating a bubble where effort couldn't even find her. I got it, kind of, but to me, that kind of stillness was suffocating. I needed motion, a landscape that stretched far enough to remind me how small I was. To feel my legs ache and my lungs burn and think this is living. That's the thing about us. We balance each other out in every way but this. She slows me down. I pull her along. It usually works. Except now, it didn't. We'll figure it out, she said that night, turning off her lamp with a practiced flick of her wrist. She curled into me, warm and trusting, like she didn't realize there was anything left to figure out. I held her anyway, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the conversation pressing into my chest. The planning began in earnest the next day, and it was almost comical how quickly it became a negotiation. Danny started strong. Cozumel. All-inclusive. I'm talking unlimited drinks, hammocks on the sand, no schedule. I countered with Patagonia. Glaciers. Mountains. Sunrise hikes. Danny, unfazed, retaliated. What about Greece? Beaches and wine. I tried Switzerland. She pitched Bali. We orbited the globe like two opposing magnets, each offering what we thought was a flawless compromise, but neither of us willing to budge from our core needs. Hers was ease. Mine was challenge. The question was, could one trip hold both? It might have been easier if we weren't both so emotionally tied to our choices. Danny wasn't just craving sunshine and cocktails. She was looking for a lifeline. Work had been grinding her down lately. Meetings that bled into the night. Emails that never stopped. Clients who drained every ounce of patience she had. Her dream vacation wasn't just about beaches. It was about escape. About getting far enough away to feel unreachable, untouchable. I understood that, but it didn't erase my own needs. For me, this wasn't just a getaway. It was a way back to myself. I needed to feel small in the face of something vast, to push my body and mind until I was reminded that I was capable of more than sitting at a desk 8 hours a day. I didn't want to escape the world. I wanted to throw myself into it. The real fight came 2 weeks in when we hit our breaking point over dinner. I suggested the Grand Canyon, an idea that seemed like a perfect middle ground. Scenic, iconic, with plenty of chances for both adventure and rest. Danny looked up from her salad, eyes narrowed. You want me to sit in the desert for a week? It's not sitting, I argued. It's hiking, exploring. There's even rafting if you're up for it. She put her fork down a little harder than necessary. Do you hear yourself? Every suggestion you make is about climbing or sweating or doing something. Why can't we just be still? I felt my defenses rise, sharp and instinctive. Because that's not what I need, I said more forcefully than I intended. And it's not fair that your version of stillness gets to dictate the whole trip. Her face shifted, the hurt blooming there before she could hide it. So what? You think I'm lazy because I don't want to spend my vacation crawling up a mountain? That's not what I said. I tried to soften my tone, but it was too late. I paused, searching for the right words. I want this to be something we do together, not just lying there side by side, not talking. I want us to actually share something. Her voice cracked when she responded, quieter now. And you don't think sharing quiet can be enough? I didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence, the air heavy between us, until finally, Danny stood and cleared her plate. I'm going for a walk, she said, and the door clicked softly behind her. That night, I lay in bed replaying the argument, the way her voice had wavered, the way my words had come out all wrong. She didn't come back until late, and when she did, she didn't say anything, just slipped under the covers, her back to me, and fell asleep. The next day, we tried to talk again, softer this time. She told me about how her parents had taken her to the same beach every summer as a kid, how it was the only time she ever saw them relax. It's not just the beach, she explained. It's what it feels like, safe, calm, like the world slows down. And I told her about the first time I climbed a mountain, how I'd stood at the top and felt like I could see the whole world, like anything was possible. It's not just the hike, I said. It's what it feels like, free, alive. We both listened, but neither of us had an answer. We still don't. The tickets are unbooked, the destination unknown. All we know is that we're trying to bridge a gap that feels impossible, trying to meet in the middle without losing what matters to each of us. So here's the question. If someone has to compromise, who should it be? Is there even a way to make this fair? Or am I the one who's being unreasonable, asking her to change her idea of happiness just to meet? It all started with the dishwasher, a dumb, humming piece of machinery, the kind of thing you don't notice until it stops working. We were sitting in the kitchen when Rachel, mid-sip of her oat milk latte, looked up from her phone and said, we could just split the cost. Half and half. Get a new one. Her voice was casual, like she was suggesting we order pizza. I looked at the dishwasher. Old, dented, and currently leaking a sad puddle onto the linoleum. It was definitely on its last legs, but something about the way she said it made me hesitate. Rachel was my roommate and my best friend since high school. We had survived years of each other's quirks. Her habit of leaving her shoes everywhere, my obsessive labeling of fridge shelves. I knew her financial situation. She was perpetually broke, working part-time at a bakery while trying to finish her art degree. But I figured, okay, maybe this time she'd pull through. Sure, I said. We'll split it. 2 weeks later, the dishwasher arrived. A sleek, shiny thing with more settings than either of us could figure out. I handed over my $350 on the spot. Rachel promised she'd send her half by the end of the month. She didn't. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was probably waiting for her next paycheck. But then the excuses started. Oh, I had to cover my car insurance this month. Next time, I swear. Or, the bakery cut my hours again. Can we push it a little further? Meanwhile, her Instagram told a different story. Photos of her at brunch with friends, a new tattoo peeking out from under her sleeve, a stack of pastel ceramics she captioned. Couldn't resist these for the kitchen. I gritted my teeth. It wasn't just the money. It was the principle. Every time I loaded a plate into that sparkling new dishwasher, I felt a little stab of resentment. I didn't want to be petty, but I also didn't want to feel like I was subsidizing her lifestyle. One night, we were watching TV when I decided to bring it up again. I kept my voice light, even though my chest was tight. Hey, any idea when you'll be able to pay me back for the dishwasher? Rachel sighed, not even looking away from the screen. I know. It's just been a rough month. I'll get it to you soon. That's what you said last month, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. She paused the show and turned to me, her face a mask of irritation. Do you think I don't want to pay you back? I'm doing the best I can, okay? I bit my tongue, the words clawing to escape. Your best doesn't look like brunch and tattoos. Instead, I nodded, swallowing my frustration. I didn't want to fight. Not over this. Not with her. But things only got worse. I started noticing little things. The pile of new clothes on her bed, the takeout containers in the trash, the delivery boxes on the porch. It wasn't like she was rolling in cash, but she clearly had enough for things that mattered to her. Just not the dishwasher. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find her sipping a $6 latte. The receipt still crumpled on the counter. Something in me snapped. Rachel, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. How can you afford lattes, but not pay me back? She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Excuse me? You heard me, I said, gesturing at the cup. It's been 3 months. I've been patient, but this is ridiculous. Her face turned red. Wow, so now you're keeping tabs on me? Do you want to itemize every single thing I spend money on? Maybe I wouldn't have to if you actually kept your promises. Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. You know what? You're acting like a martyr over $350. Do you think you're the only one struggling? I'm sorry my life isn't perfect like yours. Perfect, I said, laughing bitterly. I work overtime just to keep us afloat while you play starving artist and blow money on God knows what. Do you even realize how selfish that is? Selfish, she shot back. You're the one making this all about you. You act like money is the only thing that matters. Newsflash, Nora, not everyone can live by your spreadsheet. The fight spiraled from there, ugly and raw. We threw accusations like knives, cutting deep and fast. By the end, we were both shaking, our friendship hanging by a thread. For days, we avoided each other. The kitchen, once the heart of our apartment, became neutral territory. We texted instead of talking, our messages short and cold. Eventually, she transferred $50 to my account. A peace offering, maybe, but it only made me angrier. It felt like a slap in the face, a reminder of how little she valued our agreement. A month later, Rachel moved out. She said it was because she found a cheaper place closer to school, but I knew the real reason. Our friendship was fractured, maybe beyond repair. The dishwasher still sits in the corner of my kitchen, humming dutifully. Every time I use it, I feel a mix of guilt and resentment. Was I too harsh? Did I let money ruin something that should have been stronger than that? Or was I right to stand my ground, to demand respect and accountability from someone I trusted? The email came on a dreary Tuesday morning, sandwiched between a marketing newsletter I didn't remember subscribing to and a reminder about an overdue bill. The subject line read, "Celebrating Ben's triumph." A cluster of emojis, balloons, confetti, stars followed. I knew it was from my older sister, Marla, before I even opened it. She was the only person I knew who still used emojis like they were punctuation. The message was predictably effusive. Ben, her golden boy, her pride and joy, had won some statewide math competition. There was a picture attached of him holding a trophy half his size, grinning in that gap-toothed way of his. "We're throwing a little party this Saturday," Marla wrote. "Just family, really. It would mean so much to Ben if you could make it." I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking as if waiting for me to type some over-the-top response. "OMG, so proud. Can't wait." Instead, I closed the email and told myself I'd reply later. I didn't. It's not that I didn't love Ben. I did. He was a sweet kid, too clever for his own good. But Marla? She made everything feel performative, like we were extras in the ongoing pageant of her life. When Ben started crawling, she sent out a professional-grade video montage. When he lost his first tooth, she held a tooth fairy brunch. A math trophy? That was practically an Oscar ceremony in Marla land. Saturday rolled around, and I still hadn't RSVP'd. I woke up late, wandered to the kitchen, and made coffee while half-watching a true crime documentary. The invitation sat in the back of my mind, but the thought of spending the afternoon listening to Marla's endless monologue about Ben's brilliance filled me with dread. I'd show up to her gleaming house, where even the air smelled expensive, and spend hours nodding politely while she basked in compliments like a queen accepting tributes. Ben wouldn't even notice if I was there. He'd be too busy showing off his trophy or reciting equations to anyone who would listen. By noon, I decided not to go. It's just a kid's party, I told myself. Marla won't care. She'll have plenty of people fawning over her. I texted her a quick excuse about work stuff and left it at that. Then I ordered takeout and spent the afternoon building IKEA furniture I didn't need. 2 days later, my phone rang. I answered without looking, distracted by a spreadsheet at work. "Hey," came Marla's voice, sharp enough to cut glass. "Just wondering, were you actually busy on Saturday, or was that just an excuse?" I blinked. "What?" "Ben kept asking where you were," she continued, her tone icy. "He even saved you a slice of cake because he thought you'd show up late. I told him you probably had something really important to do." Was I lying? I fumbled for words, caught off guard by her bluntness. "Marla, it was just a little party. I didn't think it was that big of a deal." There was a pause, heavy and dangerous. "Not a big deal. My kid won a statewide competition. Do you know how hard he worked for that? How proud he was? He wanted to celebrate with his family. With you." Her words hit harder than I expected. "Marla, do you know what he said when he realized you weren't coming?" She interrupted. "Maybe Uncle Josh doesn't like me." Her voice cracked, just a little, and that sound cut deeper than any accusation. "Marla, that's not true," I said, panic rising in my chest. "You know I love Ben." "Do I?" she snapped. "Because it feels like you couldn't be bothered to show up for one afternoon. You think it's about me, don't you? You think I throw these parties for me. God, Josh, do you even see him? Do you see how much he looks up to you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Marla sighed, long and weary, as if she'd aged a decade in the span of the conversation. "You always say family's important, but when it matters, you're never there. Not for birthdays, not for milestones. You have all the time in the world for your precious hobbies, but not for us." That stung. "That's not fair," I said weakly. "Isn't it?" she said. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty fair." I didn't know what to say. Marla let out another sigh, this one softer, resigned. "Look, I don't care if you think I'm over the top. This wasn't about me. It was about Ben. You broke his heart, Josh. I hope you know that." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me sitting at my desk, staring at the empty screen. I tried to tell myself she was overreacting, that Ben would forget about it in a week. But her words kept looping in my head. You think it's about me, don't you? Do you even see him? And the truth was I hadn't. Not really. I'd seen Marla's parties, her endless spectacle. But Ben? I'd let him become a background character in her production, forgetting that behind the banners and the trophies was a real kid who just wanted his uncle to be proud of him. I haven't called her back yet. I want to, but what do I even say? I'm sorry, feels like slapping a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Maybe she's right. Maybe I only show up when it's convenient, when there's nothing at stake. Maybe I don't see the people I should care about most. Still, I can't help but wonder if she's blowing this out of proportion. It was one party, one afternoon. Does that really erase everything else? Am I the asshole? 2 years ago, the idea of a Halloween wedding felt like a whisper of magic, a perfect blend of love and mystery. It started as a daydream. Velvet ribbons trailing through candlelit halls, soft whispers of autumn air, and guests bathed in the glow of jack-o'-lanterns. It wasn't about being different. It was about being us. The venue, an old Gothic estate nestled in a grove of oak trees, became my sanctuary the moment I stepped through its arched doorway. It took months to secure it. There was a wait list, a down payment, and a promise to myself that this would be the day where my love story wasn't just told, it was felt. Then, 6 weeks before the wedding, everything cracked. It began with my mom. She called me one morning, her voice sugary sweet, but with an unmistakable edge, like the faint sound of a storm in the distance. Sweetheart, have you considered brightening things up? Making it less. Halloween. The words hung in the air, souring my coffee. Brightening things up? I repeated, laughing lightly to diffuse the tension. Mom, it's a Halloween wedding. That's the point. Her silence was a trap, and I walked straight into it. Your grandmother is worried, she said. And frankly, so am I. This theme feels wrong. It's dark, and it's not Christian. Some of the family thinks it's satanic. The word hit like a slap. Satanic? I sputtered. It's pumpkins and skeletons, Mom. Not a goat's sacrifice. But that wasn't enough. My grandmother joined in, her voice crackling through the phone like old parchment. This isn't a wedding, she said. It's a seance. If you care about family, you'll reconsider. Family. They wielded the word like a blade, twisting it to cut through my resolve. Within hours, their disapproval spread like wildfire. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all chimed in, a cacophony of judgment drowning out my carefully laid plans. At first, I tried to reason with them. I explained that Halloween wasn't about darkness or fear. It was about transformation, mystery, and the thrill of the unknown. I talked about how my fiancé and I fell in love carving pumpkins and watching The Nightmare Before Christmas. I even tried to remind them that Halloween was rooted in ancient traditions honoring the dead, not summoning demons. But logic was a whisper against their roars. We can't support this, they said. If you don't change it, we won't come. Fine, I thought. Don't come. But as the days passed, their absence began to feel less like a choice and more like an ultimatum. They weren't declining. They were staging a coup. It wasn't just my mom and grandma anymore. One of my bridesmaids, my sister, announced she was stepping down out of respect for the family. An uncle who had been helping coordinate transportation sent me a curt text. I think it's best we bow out. By the end of the week, 25 people had effectively withdrawn, leaving behind a gaping hole in my guest list and my heart. So, I made a decision. If they didn't want to come, they wouldn't. I uninvited every single one of them. I sent out new invitations, this time with QR codes to ensure no one crashed my wedding under the guise of civility. I emailed the venue with a revised guest list and told them to turn away anyone who wasn't on it. I refused to let their disapproval linger like a ghost over my day. Naturally, the backlash was immediate. My aunt, one of the uninvited, called me in tears. You can't just uninvite family, she said. People are allowed to disagree with you. But disagreement wasn't the problem. It was sabotage. They hadn't voiced concerns. They'd issued demands. They had 2 years to disagree, I told her. And they didn't. 6 weeks before my wedding isn't disagreement. It's a power play. The group chat erupted like a volcano. This isn't how you treat family, someone wrote. Another person quoted scripture at me. as if guilt could rewire my joy. Even my sister accused me of burning bridges over something as trivial as a wedding theme. But to me, it wasn't trivial. It was about holding on to the one day where I got to be exactly who I was without apology. On the day of the wedding, the sun dipped behind the oaks just as the first guests arrived. The venue came alive in the twilight. Chandeliers dripped with cobwebs, lanterns cast warm, flickering light, and shadows danced along the stone walls. My dress, a swirling storm of black and silver, caught every glimmer of candlelight as I made my way down the aisle to the sound of violins playing Sally's song. My fiancé stood at the altar, his smile breaking through the gloom like dawn. We exchanged vows beneath an arch of twisted branches and blood-red roses, our words laced with promises to love, not just in light, but in shadow. The reception was a fever dream of joy. Guests dined at tables draped in velvet, the centerpiece of each one a unique carved pumpkin. A fog machine hissed dramatically as we took to the dance floor for our first dance, and somewhere in the distance, the faint hoot of an owl added an unintentional but welcome touch of theater. My best friend dressed as a Victorian ghost and made a toast so funny it nearly made me spill my wine. Every laugh, every cheer, every clink of glasses was a reminder that I had made the right choice. As the night drew to a close, my husband and I stole a moment alone. We stood outside under the stars, the cool air brushing against our faces as the sounds of laughter and music spilled through the open doors. "Think they regret missing this?" he asked, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. I smiled, thinking of the empty chairs and the opinions that had tried to fill them. "Maybe," I said, "but I don't." And in that moment, surrounded by love and moonlight, I knew I hadn't lost anything. I'd gained a wedding that was truly mine, and the clarity to see who belonged in my life and who didn't. Let them whisper. Let them judge. I'd built my happiness on the ashes of their disapproval, and it burned brighter than ever. The idea started with a flurry of excitement after we visited my sister. Her new golden retriever puppy had practically stolen my soul within 5 minutes, all floppy paws and big brown eyes. On the car ride home, I turned to Taylor, grinning like I'd just found treasure. "We should get a dog." Taylor didn't even look up from their phone. "A dog? Seriously? Why not? We've been talking about making this place feel more like us. A dog would be perfect." Taylor finally glanced at me, their eyebrows rising. I was thinking, maybe a cat? A cat. I repeated, genuinely perplexed. What are we going to do with a cat? Watch it judge us while it sits on the back of the couch all day. Taylor smirked, but it had that sharp edge of someone gearing up for a debate. What are we going to do with a dog? Pick up its poop while it drags us around the neighborhood? And just like that, the battlefield was drawn. For days, the conversation kept bubbling up, each time escalating from a light-hearted discussion into something more pointed. We were joking, sure, but the jokes were just frosting over a cake of real disagreements. The stakes became weirdly emotional. It wasn't just about a pet. It was about what a pet represented. Taylor's vision was a soft-focus Hallmark movie. A cat perched on the windowsill, sunlight warming its fur as it purred contentedly. "A cat," they said one night, leaning against the counter, "is serenity. You come home, and there's this little creature that just wants to chill with you. No chaos, no constant maintenance. It's soothing." "That's the problem," I replied, setting my beer down. "I don't want soothing. I want excitement. I want a dog running up to the door like I'm the best thing that's ever happened to them. I want to throw a ball in the park and watch them chase it like it's the most important mission of their life." Taylor crossed their arms. "You don't see how much energy that would take? You're imagining a perfect TV dog, but you'd be the one walking it at 6 a.m. in the rain while it barks at every squirrel. And you're imagining a cat that just exists without being a jerk." "They're not jerks," Taylor said, offended on behalf of cats everywhere. "They're independent. They're indifferent." We both laughed, but the kind that isn't really funny. That weekend, Taylor took a new approach. They showed me a photo of a sleek Siamese kitten with impossibly blue eyes. "Look at this little guy. Tell me that wouldn't be perfect for us." I squinted at the screen. The kitten was adorable, I'll admit, but my heart didn't spark the way Taylor's clearly had. Yeah, cute, I said cautiously. But it's not what I imagined. Taylor sighed, their face softening. Okay, what do you imagine? I sat down across from them, gesturing with my hands like I was shaping something out of thin air. I picture a dog. Not a big one, not tiny either. Medium-sized, scruffy, adventurous. The kind of dog that makes you feel like you're a team. Like you're building memories together. Taylor rested their chin in their hand, studying me. And what about the part where you're the one doing all the work? Because let's be honest, you'd probably be the one walking it while I'm trying to have my morning coffee. I grinned. Fine, I'll walk it. You can enjoy your peaceful mornings. And the shedding? The barking. It's part of the package. Taylor laughed softly, but didn't press further. I thought I'd won, until 2 days later when they left an open tab on my laptop. 10 reasons cats make better pets than dogs. Subtle, right? We try to make it fair. One night, we each took turns presenting our case, like lawyers in a courtroom. I argued for loyalty, companionship, and adventure. Taylor countered with low maintenance, stress relief, and the unmatched elegance of a cat sitting on a windowsill. By the end of it, we were both frustrated but still unwilling to budge. The next weekend, Taylor surprised me by suggesting a trip to the animal shelter. Let's see if something clicks, they said. It felt like a peace offering, and I accepted, even though I half worried we'd leave with nothing but more unresolved tension. The shelter was loud, chaotic, and smelled faintly of disinfectant. I loved it. The second I walked in, a wiry mutt with mismatched ears launched itself against the gate of its pen, tail wagging so hard it was a blur. This one, I whispered, feeling like I'd just met a kindred spirit. Look at her. She's perfect. Taylor was already wandering toward the cat section, where a gray tabby lounged in its enclosure like royalty holding court. Come here, Taylor called softly, tapping the glass. The cat flicked its tail, and I swear its eyes said, "You're lucky I'm even acknowledging you." We spent over an hour there, each bonding with a different animal. When it was time to leave, we sat in the car silently for a long moment. I really love that dog, I said finally, and I can't stop thinking about that cat, Taylor replied. Neither of us looked at each other. It felt like admitting defeat. That night, we talked long after dinner. Taylor told me about growing up with a cat that seemed to understand their moods better than any human could. When things were bad at home, they said Mittens would just be there. No demands, no expectations. Just this constant, steady presence. I nodded, swallowing hard. I get that. But for me, it's the opposite. My childhood was quiet, kind of lonely. I always wanted a dog to break the silence, to fill the space, you know? Taylor reached for my hand. I didn't know that. We sat there, holding the weight of each other's stories. The debate felt different after that. Not lighter, but more honest. It wasn't about winning. It was about trying to find a way to honor each other's needs without sacrificing our own. We're still stuck. Every time I think about giving in and agreeing to a cat, I picture myself throwing a frisbee in an open field, a dog chasing it with unrelenting joy. And every time Taylor considers a dog, they sigh and say, "But imagine the purring." We haven't made a decision yet. For now, we're stuck in limbo, trying to find the impossible answer to a question that feels like it matters way more than it should. AITA? When the idea came to me, it felt perfect. My best friend Danny was going through the kind of heartbreak that turns everything gray. Her mom had passed suddenly a month ago, and Danny, normally the sharpest, funniest person I know, had been reduced to this brittle, quiet version of herself. It was like all her sharp edges had been sanded down. She didn't crack jokes anymore. She didn't even roll her eyes when I brought up my conspiracy theories about why our small town only had one decent coffee shop. I knew I couldn't fix things, but I wanted to give her something, anything, that would feel like a moment of joy again. Danny's mom loved stargazing. Growing up, the two of them would lie out in their backyard, looking for constellations and planets, while Danny's mom spun stories about Greek myths and galactic possibilities. I remember Danny once telling me how her mom could turn the night sky into a kind of magic show, how it made her feel tiny but also infinite at the same time. Danny hadn't been able to talk about her mom without crying since the funeral, but I thought maybe the stars could be a way to honor her without the weight of words. So I started planning. Our town isn't exactly known for stargazing. Too much light pollution, but I knew of a spot an hour out, a hilltop tucked away from the main roads where the sky still felt wild. I ordered a custom star map online, charting the exact positions of the constellations on the night Danny's mom was born. I framed it, pairing it with a tiny telescope I found secondhand, but in great condition. The real centerpiece of the plan, though, was the meteor shower. I'd read about it online. One of those rare, celestial events where the night sky bursts into streaks of light. It was supposed to happen the following Friday, and I figured we could make a night of it. Just me, Danny, and the stars. I thought about how her mom used to say that shooting stars weren't wishes. They were reminders to look up, to notice the universe looking back. It felt right. The night arrived. I picked Danny up, surprising her with hot chocolate and thermoses and blankets stacked in the back seat. She gave me a questioning look when I told her we were going on a little trip, but she didn't resist. The drive was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel as we veered onto smaller and smaller roads. Danny looked tired, like grief had crawled into her skin and made a home there. But she let me lead. When we reached the hilltop, I laid everything out: the telescope, the framed star map, the blankets. Danny stood there, taking it all in, her arms crossed against the chill. "What is this?" she finally asked, her voice careful, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the answer. I smiled. "It's for you." For her. I thought maybe tonight could be something. Her eyes flicked to the star map, and I saw it hit her, what it meant. She reached out to touch the frame, her fingers brushing the glass. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and I thought maybe I'd done it. Maybe I'd found a way to give her a piece of her mom back. But then her expression hardened. She set the frame down on the blanket, too carefully, like it was fragile in a way she wanted me to notice. "You planned all this without asking me?" The question stunned me. "Yeah, yes." I wanted it to be a surprise. She let out a sharp laugh, bitter and unexpected. "A surprise." "Right, because what I need right now is to be ambushed with memories of my mom." My stomach dropped. "Danny, that's not what this is." "I thought it'd be." "Thought it'd be what?" She interrupted, her voice rising. "Fun? Healing? Do you even understand what it's like to lose someone like that? You think staring at some stars is going to make it better?" I opened my mouth to respond, but she didn't let me. "I get it, okay? You're trying to help. But you don't get to decide how I grieve. You don't get to hijack my feelings and wrap them up in some pretty little package with hot chocolate and telescopes and think that'll fix me." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I wasn't trying to fix you, Danny. I just wanted to give you something meaningful. I thought this." I gestured to the setup, to the stars blinking above us, would mean something. She turned away, rubbing her arms as if the cold had suddenly gotten to her. "It's not that simple," she said quietly, almost to herself. "You don't get it." I didn't know what to say. For weeks, I'd been pouring everything into this idea, imagining how it might pull her out of the fog, even for a moment. And now it felt like I'd been naive, maybe even selfish. I thought I was giving her a gift, but all I'd done was remind her of how broken things were. The meteor shower started a few minutes later, streaks of light carving across the sky in silent brilliance. I sat there on the blanket, staring up, waiting for Danny to sit down beside me. She didn't. She stayed standing, her back to me, her shoulders stiff against the night. We drove home in silence, the telescope still folded up in the back seat. She didn't touch the star map again. When I dropped her off, she mumbled a thank you without looking at me, then disappeared into her house. I sat in the car for a long time afterward, the engine idling, wondering if I'd made things worse. I thought about her words. "You don't get it." Maybe she was right. I don't know what it's like to lose a mother. I don't know how it feels to carry that kind of grief. But I do know that I wanted to help her carry it, even if I went about it the wrong way. I wanted to show her she wasn't alone. Now I'm left sitting here with this ache in my chest, wondering if I overstepped. Did I push too hard? Too soon? Or is it wrong to try to bring light into someone else's darkness, even when they didn't ask for it? It started with a chair, a stupid, rickety dining chair with a wobbly leg that my friend Dana had dragged into my apartment after she moved out of hers last summer. "I can't fit this in my new place," she'd said, shrugging like it wasn't a big deal. "Can I leave it here for a while? Just until I figure things out?" "Sure," I'd said, because that's what I always said to Dana. "Sure. Yes. Of course. No problem." The chair joined a collection of her things that had already accumulated in my one-bedroom apartment. 3 mismatched boxes of winter clothes, a pair of roller skates she swore she'd use someday, and a coffee maker that didn't even work but was sentimental. It wasn't just stuff, though. Dana had a way of spilling into every corner of my life. She was charming, chaotic, magnetic, and completely unbothered by boundaries. At first, I didn't mind. Honestly, I was flattered she needed me. Dana was one of those people who lit up a room without even trying, and somehow, she'd chosen me to confide in. When her boyfriend dumped her last year, I was the one who stayed up all night feeding her ice cream and convincing her she didn't need him. When her car broke down, I drove her to work for 3 weeks straight. When her paycheck ran late, I covered her rent. She always made it seem like a temporary crisis, like she just needed a little help until she got back on her feet. But Dana never seemed to find solid ground. She just leaned harder on me. Then came the dog, a rescue pit mix named Gus that she adopted impulsively on a Saturday morning because he looked so sad in the cage. Dana brought him over that night, bursting through my door with a bag of kibble and a leash. "You're going to love him," she said, ignoring the fact that I didn't even own a pet and was allergic to dogs. "Can you watch him tomorrow?" "I have a work thing." "Tomorrow," I echoed, looking at the dog, who was already sniffing at my couch like it was a chew toy. "Dana, I can't." "Just for a few hours," she interrupted, flashing her trademark smile. "You're the best." That was 6 months ago. Gus had spent more time at my place than hers ever since. Every time I asked when she was taking him back, she had an excuse. Her apartment was too small. Her landlord was making surprise inspections. She was figuring it out. The same refrain I'd heard about the chair, the skates, the coffee maker. Only now it was alive and shedding all over my rugs. It all came to a head last Thursday. I was running late for work, juggling my laptop bag, a half-eaten bagel, and Gus's leash because Dana had dropped him off the night before just for a little while. As I struggled to lock the door, Gus lunged at a squirrel, yanking me forward so hard I dropped everything. My bagel rolled pathetically down the hallway. I wanted to cry. By the time I got to work, I was fuming. I texted Dana, "We need to talk about Gus. You can't keep leaving him with me. It's too much." She didn't reply for hours, which was typical. When she finally did, her message made my blood boil. "You're being dramatic. I thought you loved Gus." I stared at my phone, feeling a familiar swirl of anger and guilt. This was Dana's gift, turning every complaint into an overreaction, every boundary into a betrayal. But something snapped in me. I'd been carrying her weight for so long, I didn't even realize how tired I was. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I called her that evening. "Dana," I started, trying to keep my voice calm, "I can't keep watching Gus. It's not fair to me, or to him." There was a long pause. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "Wow, okay," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't realize you were so selfish." "Selfish?" I repeated, stunned. "Do you have any idea how much I've done for you?" "Oh, here we go," she snapped. "I didn't realize friendship came with a checklist. Sorry for thinking you cared." Her words stung, but I pushed through. "This isn't about me not caring. It's about you taking advantage. I've been bending over backward for you for years, Dana. I'm done." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just got quiet, which was somehow worse. "Fine," she said finally, her voice flat. "Guess I'll figure it out myself. Thanks for nothing." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of relief and dread. For the first time in years, I'd stood up to Dana. But had I just ended our friendship? The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of texts from mutual friends. Apparently, Dana had told them her version of the story, how I'd abandoned her in her time of need. One message stood out. "Wow, I didn't think you were that kind of person." I wanted to scream. For years, I'd been that kind of person, the one who showed up, who gave, who sacrificed. And now, because I said no once, I was the villain? I don't know if Dana and I will ever repair things. Part of me misses her, the fun version of her that made life feel electric. But another part of me feels lighter, like I finally set down a bag I'd been carrying for miles. I'm learning that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and that's a lesson I should have learned long ago. It was one of those mornings where the sky felt too big, stretching endlessly above the ribbon of gray highway. The kind of morning where you could almost taste the frost in the air, see your breath if you slowed down enough to notice. But I wasn't slowing down. My usual coffee thermos was tucked in the cup holder, but I hadn't taken a sip yet. It was just there for moral support. The clock on the dashboard clicked over to 7:14, reminding me I'd cut it close. Again, traffic was merciful, though not the usual snarl of red taillights and slouching drivers. I eased into the middle lane, already mentally ticking off my to-do list for the day. That's when I saw my opening. The right lane was crawling, but the gap was there. A chance to slide in before the semi up ahead made it impossible. I flicked on my turn signal, checked my mirrors, and made my move. At least I tried to. The car in the right lane surged forward, closing the gap with a kind of passive-aggressive precision that only happens on Monday mornings. I bit down on a curse, the kind you let out when no one's around to hear it. My hand gripped the wheel tighter as I glanced over to size up the offender. What kind of person plays this game at 7 a.m.? And then, in an instant, all the irritation in my chest flipped into something unrecognizable. Surprise. There she was, my wife. Her eyes crinkled with a grin I could practically hear through the glass. One hand on the wheel, the other raised high in a dramatic wave. She looked ridiculous, waving like she'd just spotted an old friend across a crowded room. I blinked, caught between a laugh and a groan. What was she doing here? We never crossed paths on the commute. Her route to work was always different. And more importantly, what was she doing cutting me off? I couldn't process it fast enough. My body went into autopilot, and instead of waving back, I stared ahead, jaw tightening as I refocused on the road. My exit was looming. By the time I'd merged, awkwardly, with too much distance to make it feel like I'd won anything, she was gone. Just a blur of red brake lights and a receding laugh in my head. It wasn't until I parked at work that my phone buzzed. Yoon waved back, crying-faced. I read the text twice, the ghost of her smile still hanging in my mind. I smiled, then shoved my phone into my pocket without replying. She had to be joking, right? Later at home, the energy of the day had settled into something warm and familiar. The TV hummed in the background as I rifled through the mail. Then, over the rustle of envelopes, she spoke up. "So, you didn't wave this morning." I looked up, startled. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing the tiniest smirk, part teasing, part accusatory. The same look she gave me when I left dishes in the sink or forgot to refill the burrito. "You're serious?" I asked, setting the mail down. "Yeah, I'm serious." She stepped into the room, her voice light, but carrying that thread of insistence that made it clear this wasn't just a passing comment. "I was being cute. You didn't even smile." I opened my mouth, ready to defend myself, but she held up a finger, cutting me off. "And don't say you were driving because you looked at me." "I saw you." I laughed, a short, almost guilty sound. "Of course I looked at you. I had to make sure it wasn't some random lunatic trying to run me off the road." She threw her head back, groaning dramatically. "You're impossible." "No, seriously," I said, my grin widening. "You sped up, blocked me from merging, and then waved like you were on a parade float. Do you know how insane that is?" Her smirk returned, more defiant now. "Insane or adorable?" "Dangerous," I countered. "You could have caused an accident." She rolled her eyes, leaning against the back of the couch. "I wasn't going that fast. Besides, I saw you before you saw me. I had it under control." "That's not how driving works," I said, crossing my arms. "It's not about you having it under control. What if I panicked? What if someone else didn't see you?" Her expression softened just a little, but she wasn't ready to give up the fight. Okay, fine, maybe it wasn't the safest thing ever. But I was excited. I thought it'd be funny. It was funny, I admitted, after I realized it wasn't some jerk cutting me off for no reason. But in the moment, I didn't know what was happening. I was just trying to survive. She sighed, dropping onto the couch, and pulling a throw pillow into her lap. I get it. I do. I just thought it'd be this cute little moment, and she hesitated, the words hanging in the air like a dropped thread. I ruined it. I finished for her, sitting down beside her. I'm sorry. She glanced at me, eyebrows raised. You're sorry? Yeah, I said, leaning back against the cushions. For not waving. For not. I don't know. Being in the moment with you. She studied me for a second, her lips twitching upward. Well, I guess I forgive you. Generous. I teased, nudging her with my elbow. She nudged me back, her smile breaking into a laugh. But next time, you'd better wave. Or honk. Or something. Next time, I promised, my voice warm with something that felt like relief. Just don't speed up and cut me off. She grinned, resting her head on my shoulder. No promises. And in that quiet, easy moment, the whole ridiculous episode felt less like a conflict and more like a reminder of how even the smallest, silliest gestures can mean everything if you're paying attention. There's this unwritten rule in families. You don't call people out on their illusions. My mom, for instance, has always believed she's an exceptional cook. And for the most part, we all play along. It's harmless, right? So what if her lasagna tastes like wallpaper paste? She's happy. We're all happy. But last month, I decided to cross that line. Not directly, mind you. I didn't say a word about her cooking. I was trying to help in my own way. I wanted to do something kind for her, something thoughtful. That's how this mess started. My mom turned 60 last month, and my siblings and I planned a big party at her house. Nothing too fancy, just family, a few of her friends, and a lot of food. Naturally, Mom insisted on cooking everything herself. She said it was her gift to us, but we all knew what that meant. Vats of her infamous potato salad, soggy casseroles, and enough beige food to make you wonder if she'd forgotten what color existed. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I couldn't let her spend her milestone birthday stressing over a stove just to serve us food nobody would actually enjoy. That's when I came up with the idea of hiring a caterer. Not just any caterer, a good one. Someone who could take Mom's menu and elevate it while still keeping the spirit of her dishes. Make the potato salad edible, add some flair to her meatloaf, stuff like that. I figured we'd surprise her with the catered food on the day of the party. She'd get to relax, enjoy herself, and maybe even take credit for the food if she wanted. Win-win. I coordinated everything in secret, which wasn't easy because my mom has eyes everywhere. I told the caterer to make everything look home-cooked, down to serving the food in mismatched dishes like Mom's. My siblings were on board, though they warned me to tread carefully. You know how she is, my sister Sarah said. She might not take it the way you think. She'll be relieved, I assured her. Trust me. The big day arrived, and everything was going perfectly at first. Mom was in high spirits, greeting guests in her garden, telling anyone who'd listen about how she'd been cooking up a storm all week. Meanwhile, the caterer snuck in through the back door, set up in the kitchen, and laid out the food in record time. By the time the guests started eating, everyone was raving about how delicious everything was. This casserole is amazing, Linda, one of Mom's friends gushed. What's your secret? Oh, just a pinch of love, Mom replied with a knowing wink. I watched her from across the yard, feeling both smug and relieved. She looked so proud. This was exactly what I'd wanted for her. But then, as the party was winding down, Mom went into the kitchen to get dessert and found the caterer packing up her equipment. I didn't see it happen, but I heard the fallout. Who is this? Mom's voice thundered through the house, silencing every conversation in the garden. People looked at me, confused, as Mom stormed outside, caterer in tow. What's going on? She demanded, glaring at me like I'd personally set her birthday cake on fire. I tried to explain. I just wanted you to enjoy the day, Mom. You shouldn't have to cook on your birthday. You hired someone to replace me? She snapped, her voice shaking. In my own kitchen? It's not like that, I said quickly, but she cut me off. It's exactly like that. You think I'm a joke, don't you? You've always looked down on me, haven't you? Her accusations hit me like a freight train. No, Mom, that's not it at all, I said, desperate to make her understand. I thought this would make you happy. Well, you thought wrong, she hissed, turning on her heel and marching back into the house. The rest of the party was a blur. My siblings tried to smooth things over. telling me Mom just needed time to cool off. But I knew better. Mom wasn't just mad, she was hurt. I'd taken something she loved, something she took pride in, and turned it into a problem to be fixed. And the worst part? I'd done it under the guise of kindness. That night, after everyone had left, I stayed behind to clean up. Mom didn't say a word to me as I worked. She sat in the living room, staring at the darkened TV like she couldn't even bear to look at me. Before I left, I tried one last time. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said quietly. I really was trying to help. She didn't turn around. "If you wanted to help, you should have asked me what I needed," she said, her voice flat. Not decided for me. Those words have been replaying in my head ever since. I thought I was doing something thoughtful, but maybe I was just being selfish. Maybe I wanted to avoid the discomfort of watching her struggle, or the guilt of pretending to enjoy her food. Maybe I didn't care enough to see how much the cooking meant to her, how it was never just about the food. So now I'm left wondering, did I really do something wrong? Was I selfish for trying to make things easier? Or was she being unreasonable for taking it so personally? All I know is that I can't shake the image of her sitting there, stiff and silent, her pride bruised because of something I thought was an act of love.